Today I want to talk about a game called Paranormasight, developed by Square Enix and Xeen. That's a fun development. That's a fun production name, Xeen. And this is a visual novel that, quite frankly, didn't really get that much promotion, but in my humble opinion, might find itself onto some people's Game of the Year lists for the end of the year. Okay, so I know what you're thinking. Oh, it's a visual novel. Well, if I'm playing a game, why would I want to read a bunch? That's not gaming, that's just reading. I'm a gamer with a capital G. And to that, I understand the argument, but at the same time, not all visual novels are completely sus or bad. For example, looking at the Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney series, some visual novels are extremely good, and this one definitely qualifies as a must play, in my humble opinion. Let me set the stage here. We are going to be going to Honjo, Japan, a real city in Japan that actually exists. You can go and travel and visit all of the different places that are presented in this game. It also takes place before the massive technology era that we find ourselves in right now, and surrounds this whole idea of this thing called the Rite of Resurrection. Couldn't tell by now, this is a horror game. It's a horror plot. All horror elements are going to be wrapped up into this thing. And so you can imagine that this Rite of Resurrection, on one fateful night, a bunch of people find themselves with curse stones, upon which they might be able to actually activate this Rite of Resurrection only if they're able to kill enough people and gather enough soul dregs to do so. And so all of these different curse users run around. It raises a bunch of questions. Who's gonna do what? Why tonight out of all of the nights? What's going on? Is there some greater mystery going on? A bunch of different things kind of get wrapped up, and as you go through the story, you kind of explore the greater mystery of what the heck is going on around this Rite of Resurrection. On top of that too, these curses, they've got a lot of character too. Each curse is based on the 7 mysteries of Honjo. I think there's actually like 10 or 12 of them in the game. It's not, I think they explain it at some point. But all of these are based on old tales that have been passed down through generations of, quite frankly, grisly murders or deaths, upon which the spirit has come back and accompanies that curse stone. And so that's all tied into how these curses operate. For example, there's one guy who got burned to death back in the day, and so his curse stone involves burning other people, just immolating them on the spot. So it's all kind of wrapped up in together, and it does a really good job doing so. But what really captivated my interest, and of course this is a visual novel, so you gotta make sure you've got very strong plot and characters to make sure that the people are enjoying their time going through the whole story. And in my opinion, the characters are extremely fun, and they don't get annoying at all. Listen, let's be honest. This is made by Square Enix. They like to just lean into tropes sometimes, and quite frankly, all of these characters are very tropey. And it's really easy when you lean into these tropes to kind of make annoying characters, but to my surprise, none of these characters actually became annoying. They lived up to their trope, but it was just off enough that, you find them enjoyable, you learn more about them, and then you can continue through the story. It doesn't become disruptive at all, which is a little bit of a fine line to walk, and they nailed it. There's also just like a bunch of silly, wacky plot devices that they just like throw into the game, and they're not afraid to kind of be crazy with it. For example, there is a paranormal investigation classified unit of the police department that exists. There's a serial killer running around. There's a mercenary going through. There's mediums. There's black magic. It just kind of goes buck wild with some of these things that they all just jam it into the plot. But what's kind of cool about this is, even though it is a little bit more wacky and silly, they kind of lean into it without it ever becoming too lame. They're just kind of like, oh yes, by the way, this is a thing now. And you're like, oh, that's kind of funny, but all right, I guess we're just gonna roll with it and see how this all works out. And one of the other strengths of how they laid this thing out is that the plot pacing is actually fantastic. Good God, it's so good. If you couldn't tell, there's like an overwhelming amount of stuff that just kind of is packaged in this visual novel, but it never feels overwhelming when you're actually going through it. It just hints at things throughout the entire thing, but just gives you enough for something for you to focus on, and then as soon as that gets resolved, then all of the elements start to come into play, and then you can kind of broaden your horizons in that sense. If you want to take a look at the plot structure of this thing, it starts off with just giving you a very basic overview of the world, the dynamics, some of the rules, as well as some of the characters, and then it transitions into exploring those characters, making you care about these characters before we get into the intricacies of actually going in and solving the mystery. It's extremely well done, and it doesn't lose itself at all, and you're able to keep up with whatever is going to be happening in the plot. It's almost like Chekhov's gun, but literally every single thing that gets presented to you in the game will come back around at some point, but it never will actually overwhelm you. And one of the reasons why I think that they do a fantastic job of not overwhelming you is some of the features that they build into the game. When you think about this as a visual novel, this really pushes the boundaries on just the medium in general. Medium, like the spirits, this is fun. That was unintended. I'm clever sometimes. There's this thing called the information tab, which honestly just saves lives, and it keeps a document of every single character you've met, every single event that has happened up until now, all the information on the mysteries, all the information on the curse stones, all of that type of stuff, and it actually updates as you continue to play through the game. So later on, if someone's asking you like, oh man, what the heck is that curse stone do? You can just go in there and then reference all the material that you need, and you'll have all the information that you possibly want. How the actual game works too is kind of fun. It's separated into a timeline where you follow 3 different paths. You don't have to go through it in the exact same order, but you can see where things kind of line up just in general with time points. They actually play around with this quite a bit because what you have to do in one group's portion of the timeline can affect the other people as well. And so it almost feels like you're playing God a little bit. You've got God's hand, you're moving pieces into place, so then that way you can forward the plot on the different timelines that are going on. On top of that too, there's a bunch of fourth wall breaking elements to this as well. It feels like the game knows that it's a visual novel, and so they like to play around with that. I don't want to give too many spoilers because some of the features can be extremely spoilery, but just as an example, literally one of the puzzles, you have to get through it by adjusting the volume meter in your menus. And when I figured that out, that was the moment for me that I'm like, okay, this is something different. This is something special here, and I am on board and ready for this ride. On top of that too, the game is incredibly stylish. The way that everything is stylized matches the tone of the world as well as the bleakness of just the overall situation, while still finding a little bit of lightness as you kind of progress throughout the plot. The style really lends itself well, and on top of that too, because this is creepy at times, it just looks fantastic from that perspective as well. So this is kind of why this game struck me as really interesting and made me want to talk about it a lot more, because if you take a look at Square Enix's catalog, they're just pumping out 1 million games a minute. Most of them are farming games. Thank you, Nintendo Direct, we will never forget about that. But that was what was really interesting, because Paranormasight kind of went completely under the radar, didn't really receive that much promotion, whereas all of these random games are just being promoted out the wazoo so that people are going to know what they are. And on top of that too, one of the best things about Paranormasight is that it felt like Square Enix really just understood what type of game this is going to be and who their audience is going to be. Modern PC gamer, you know, they're not going to be sitting in front of their computer and just doing a visual novel. I made fun of it I made that joke at the beginning there, but quite frankly, that's true. There's so many other AAA title games out there right now that are competing for people's attention. So why would they choose to play a visual novel when they could be, you know, doing Fortnite or Apex Legends or Valorant? Like, there's so many other options that currently exist out there. And that's why making the move of putting this thing onto iOS, Android, and Switch, I think that's the best medium for visual novels to exist on. I don't know about you, but when I go to bed, you know, I don't really just go to sleep. I'm usually on my phone for a little bit, whether or not I'm watching YouTube videos or reading some manga or doing something like that. And this fit that perfectly, because now I can actually just read through this visual novel, which has a very interesting plot and characters, while I'm doing my bedtime routine type of thing. And even like thinking back, you know, when I was going through the Ace Attorney series, I was playing that on DS on like road trips and stuff like that. I genuinely do think that visual novels work best when they are on these portable platforms, because that way you don't have to sit in front of your computer and, you know, click through a bunch of things when you could be doing something else. This is more of like an on the go, you know, you can kind of get through a chapter on the visual novel and you're good to go. Quite frankly, like I really don't have that many complaints about this. If you're expecting this to be exactly what it is, and it not only delivers, but it exceeded my expectations by quite a bit. Okay, the only complaint I can think of is like, by the end of it, I stayed up until 4 o'clock in the morning because I'm like, oh my god, I gotta find out what the ending is. And like I said, I play it right before bed, and I'm like, oh, the next day was really tough at work, but you know what, you just gotta do what you gotta do sometimes. And that's gonna be the end of the video. Honestly, I made this video just because I wanted to share something that I really enjoyed with everybody out there. I can't describe how much I actually really just enjoyed this whole package of Paranormasight, and would highly encourage you to check it out as well. All I'm gonna say is, you know, it's niche when they don't even have a wiki summary plot on the actual website. I was checking it just to make sure that I remembered certain plot points, and it just simply doesn't exist, which is crazy to me because it's just so well written. But alrighty, like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Leave me a comment down below. Maybe you are one of the few people who played through Paranormasight and would love to hear what you thought about the game too. I just hit my microphone. I hope that didn't make any audio fidelity. But alright, I'll catch you guys in the next video. See you later, and bye-bye. What? That's such an awkward ending.